Assalamu alaikum, mere aziz hamvatno. I'm Afshin Chak with Muhammad Fuad. We'll be hosting PAEZ KATH today, and we have a fascinating program lined up for you.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Muhammad Fuad. The message of Afshin Chak is to is PAEZ KATH program ek mezban. The tuni khatra dilchasp program lineup komut kare.
Our program today will include an analysis of the tyrannical Indian state and its desperate overtures for conversation with Pakistan.
We believe that for far too long, Indians have corrupted the Kashmiri narrative, twisting it to suit their own needs, to suit their own vested interests. Kashmir was never a part of India, and we will have a reading of Dr. Khalid Ahmed Butt's book.
Also, we will listen to Dr. Mujahid Gilani, a Kashmiri who is active near the ceasefire line, to share his insights on the ground reality. Then we have our Umar Mukhtar segment that wraps up weekly news. Thank you.
First, let's start with Tilawat of Quran.
मशकूर अफशीन और मोहम्मद वन करफ कुरान शरीफ तिलावत शुरू
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम अलिफ लाम मीम साद किताबुन उन्ज़िला इलैक फला यकुन फी सदरिक हरजुम मिन्हु लितुन्ज़िर बिही व ज़िक्रा تتبعوا من دونه أولياء قليلا ما تذكرون وكم من قرية فلنسألن الذين أرسل إليهم ولنسألن المرسلين فلنقصن عليهم بعلم وما كنا غائبين والوزن يومئذ الحق فمن ثقلت موازينه فأولئك هم المفلحون ومن خفت موازينه فأولئك الذين خسروا أنفسهم بما كانوا بآياتنا يظلمون ولقد مكناكم في الأرض وجعلنا لكم فيها معايش وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَاكُمْ ثُمَّ صَوَّرْنَاكُمْ ثُمَّ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ ثُمَّ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ لَمْ يَكُن مِّنَ السَّاجِدِينَ.
Assalamu alaikum and hello everyone. You are listening to episode 4 of Violates Kashmir, brought to you by Kashmir Civitas. I'm Afshin Chak.
Assalamu alaikum, I'm Muhammad Fawad.
On today's podcast, we will be discussing the impact of occupation on one's mental health and how this occupation negatively impacts the youth, with daily curfews, killings, communication blockades, and forced disappearances, constant shutdown of schools, along with non-Kashmiris being flooded into Kashmir to alter the demography of the region. Kashmir is on the brink of having an exceptional amount of disillusioned youth who are viewing the future as bleak and abysmal. Kashmir is currently running on 2G internet, and schools are closed, and this makes the whole learning process extremely challenging, thus further exacerbating the mental health of an already vulnerable population. We will be sharing some audio and written statements from Kashmiris today, where you will hear how their mental health has suffered under occupation. Afterwards, we'll also be discussing a well-known Shaheed who fought against the Indian state and its tyranny. We will be discussing martyr Dr. Manan Wani, regarded as a hero amongst Kashmiris for standing up to the Indian state. First, Muhammad Fawad will update you with current news in Kashmir.
Thank you, Afshin. So I would like to start with the updates on encounters that have taken place in these 2 weeks. About 12 Kashmiri freedom fighters were killed in different operations carried out by Indian forces in Srinagar, Shopian, Pulwama and Kulgam districts of the valley. Another civilian was killed after being hit by an army vehicle in Srinagar. After hitting the vehicle, the armored vehicle fled the spot and disappeared. So there's another interesting story that I would like to read. 3 teachers booked under PSA. J&K police is accusing a religious school in Shopian district of Kashmir that they have been giving education to students and some of them have later joined militants. Jammu and Kashmir police on Monday said that it has booked 3 teachers of a religious school in Shopian district under the Public Safety Act after it came to the forefront that some of its students and alumni were found involved in militant activities, reported a local agency, Kashmir News Services. The school named Sirajul Aloom Imam Sahab. It is not that the school has not been under observation. We have already booked 3 teachers of the school, namely Abdul Ahad Butt, Rauf Butt and Muhammad Yusuf Wani under the PSA. The Inspector General of Police in Kashmir told the reporters. The chairman of the school, Muhammad Yusuf Mattu, called these allegations as baseless. Talking to this news service, he refutes these allegations and he says, and I quote, "We refute these allegations. Some of the students who had become militants had already left the seminary and were home for a longer period before joining the militant ranks." So there's one interesting story that is coming out from Kashmir that's about the property tax being imposed. Now, everybody who is in Kashmir and owns a property is going to pay a tax to the government. We already know that how economy is ravaged since last year when Article 370 was abrogated, and during this year, the whole pandemic we have seen since its inception, since its beginning. So this is grave injustice with people of Kashmir. They don't have good source of income. All they have now is the property they have left, and now it's being taxed. So this is all from the news stories.
Thank you for the updates, Fawad. We now move on to the discussion of Kashmiri youth and how their mental health has been negatively impacted by the Indian state. In Kashmir, with a population of nearly 10 million, 1 in 5 individuals is believed to be suffering from mental health issues, which includes PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. According to BMJ Global Health, an online journal that did a study in 2015 titled Prevalence of Anxiety, Depression, and Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder in the Kashmir Valley, they estimated that 45% of Kashmiri adults were under mental duress. They further found that 41% of adults had probable depression, 26% with probable anxiety, and 19% with probable PTSD. The 3 disorders were associated with the following characteristics: being female, over 55 years of age, having had no formal education, living in a rural area, and being widowed, divorced, or separated.
There are not enough proper programs in place in Kashmir to assist individuals going through these various mental health issues. There have been other issues that have been exceedingly increasing in Kashmir as well, such as unemployment in youth, poverty, delayed marriage, and an increase in drug addiction amongst the youth. Drugs are often taken to numb internal pain and is also being supplied by India as a way to destroy the future of Kashmiri youth by rendering them useless and addicted to harmful substances and thus unable to put up a proper resistance against India's tyranny. This is of deep concern to us in the Kashmiri community, and we need to work on strategies on how to guide our youth away from things that will affect them physically and psychologically.
I have personally witnessed the destruction things like alcohol and drugs can do to people. In the West, we have systems in place to help people, but not everyone utilizes these programs. And I'm aware these programs are not always available in Kashmir. It's also very difficult to get rid of an addiction once it becomes a habit. My only advice to the Kashmiri youth that are listening is that your biggest war is with yourself first. You cannot defeat your enemy if you're in a weakened position physically and mentally. I know occupation and war can destroy you mentally, but you can fight it and you can overcome it. Iman and education will be the keys to your success and keys to Kashmir becoming free from occupation and becoming prosperous. Most Kashmiris that I speak to inside and outside of Kashmir are highly educated people, and our strong Iman combined with education makes us a force to reckon with. This combination is a kind of weapon against our occupier, as these are two things it cannot control, even if they are controlling other aspects of our lives. The more we have these two things, the better able we are to resist them and to challenge their propaganda against us. I have spoken to numerous Kashmiris who have been in jail, who've been shot by pellet guns, who've been paralyzed, who have lost mothers, brothers, sisters, fathers, uncles, cousins, and close friends to the Indian state. Many have spoken to me in private. Some sent me pictures of their injuries from pellet guns. One Kashmiri boy told me how his brother was killed in 2003 on his way home from school by the Indian state in a civilian killing. Others have told me about their mothers and fathers being detained in jail for speaking out against the Indian state, where they have now been growing up without their parents present. It's not easy for me to hear this, and I wish I could help more. The least I can do at this moment in time is to share your stories and make sure your voices are listened to. You are not and never will be alone. So the questions we posed to Kashmiris on social media were the following. How has occupation impacted your mental health? How have you overcome obstacles, if any, to your learning? What steps did you take or are currently taking to ensure that your educational aspirations are not hindered by occupational forces? And have you or anyone you know ever experienced PTSD? We received many responses from Kashmiris worldwide, some in audio notes and some with written statements. Some names have been changed to protect identities, as the Indian state, as I'd mentioned in previous podcast episodes, often engages in targeted harassment of individuals speaking against them and even goes after their families. Many people have and continue to be detained that have dared to question the Indian regime.
Here are the responses that we received. Please note, names have been changed to protect the identities of those who chose to submit their answers. Akhtar from the Kupwara district said, "This occupation has made my life hell. I cannot think about my future. I just keep on thinking about how we can be liberated from India. My friends tease me because of that overthinking. I have experienced PTSD. I often remember the time when my uncle, that was later on martyred, and my father were dragged and beaten, and that moment always haunts me to this day." Imran wrote another response we have got. "I am a research scholar and say, what's the impact of foreign occupation on my mental health? Honestly, is there any doubt about it? I have studied here all my life and tried hard to get out of here to complete my studies, but wasn't that lucky. Maybe it's something that I couldn't afford. This emerged from the fact that all the time you're dragged unknowingly into a black hole that means death. A bad news. Its impact is traumatic. You tend to lose your focus and it's hard to find interest. All you wish is to sleep, but then that's something you cannot afford to do. It's therefore an opportunity to find peace. And that's exactly what you do. You tend to be very home in a world that takes you away from reality. Shut your doors to it, but it's difficult because it comes to you no matter how much you try to avoid it confronting. Another response we have received is from Shahrukh. "Living in Kashmir is hard, especially if you are a student. You feel suffocated as if the world is closing in on you in an attempt to choke you. But the situation after 5th August last year was even more harrowing. How does one focus on studies when one fears that they're going to end up like Annie Frank?" People here live in constant trauma, and as a student, it affects everything you do. Your hair starts to whiten in middle school. Constantly, anxiety and a feeling of despair have become a part of our life. We find refuge in spirituality and remembering that these dark times shall pass too. Practical steps one can take are to keep a journal, take long walks, and just let go of things at times. It's also better to pursue education either here in Kashmir itself or out of India. It may involve giving up lucrative offers, but one has to ensure one's safety. You also need to be self-reliant, knowing that schools, colleges will be closed for most of the year. You need to be well prepared since the internet is unreliable as well. You need to take care of getting all relevant material in advance too. Other than this, just take a break from everything for a while and trust that history is in good hands.
When asked about how his occupation impacted your mental health, Salman wrote the following: India has illegally occupied Kashmir and has long-lasting negative consequences on mental health, which we see in our daily lives. First, and the most important thing I want to share is that Kashmir lost many generations into the unknown graveyards. Every other house has been badly affected due to the military occupation by Indian forces. Their presence on the streets makes anyone angry, and here is the first step when one's mental health gets challenged. Unwanted fear of being killed, framed into the activity which goes against occupation, or arrested is daily living experiences of Kashmiris. The ongoing turmoil has exposed us to many psychosocial and economic problems. It has resulted in many mental health issues like long-term aggressive behavior among children and young adults. Stress, anxiety, depression, and sleeplessness is common among Kashmiris now. It has not only affected us psychologically, but physically as well. Due to the daily encounters, lathi charges, etc., many young and old have become lifetime disabled. I was born in 1992, and that was the period which was the most brutal to Kashmir, according to my parents. My parents used to share their stories that they had never seen that kind of brutal occupation, and it was something new and unacceptable for them. As I grew up, I have heard the sounds of gunshots, mine blasts, air blasts. I have been socialized in a way that these gunshots were treated to be sounds of normal firecrackers. That was itself learning how to handle these sounds or any other activity. Living in an armed conflict or occupation has become our daily affair, and any type of living experience or learning cannot be discussed without discussing armed conflict. You don't know what will happen in the next moment. In this way, I try to normalize the already abnormal thing, and I believe this is the highest level of saturation, wherein you try to make yourself understand and let happen what happens. However, normalizing any abnormal thing itself is another challenge and subject to further discussion. This behavior can have long-lasting impact on someone's life. The presence of occupational forces has caused lots of distress among Kashmiris since decades. In this contention, Kashmir has lost many generations without getting properly educated. However, little or more people still attempt to get an education despite all the issues. The Indian state's presence has surely hindered the educational aspirations for many. But for me, as I already told you, let it happen what happens. And this is the main thing which prompts me to move ahead and achieve my educational aspiration. Another Kashmiri from Chopin that we will call Adam wrote, being occupied not only occupies you physically, but puts a psychological barrier that affects your emotions, feelings, and puts you in a state of stress, anxiety, depression, and sometimes can bring on disorders such as bipolar disorder. The life here in Kashmir is not what we call a normal one. Each and everyone here has some kind of mental stress or depression. I, being part and parcel of this society, have felt all of this. I have felt many mental health problems, even as I worked hard to cope with them. But to be honest, I have hundreds of times locked myself in my room and wept for hours because that thin line was crossed and I could not bear the pain anymore. Sometimes locked up for months without being in touch with my loved ones, I have visited deserted places to shout loudly to be able to keep myself away from being totally mental. All this has badly affected my studies, and I'm hardly able to focus on my studies because I felt that people who left for good cause are haunting me. I have memories deep in my unconscious mind that haunt me whenever I try to focus on my studies. It has always been hard to continue education being in such a state of mind, but somehow I managed to get my education. I have almost compromised the quality of education and many times only studied to qualify for exams. I used to visit people in my area who could help, and thank God they helped without any second thought. I have borrowed books from many people and always kept speaking to my friends for keeping my motivation levels high. All these things help me to somehow manage my studies. So you have now heard some anonymous written statements from Kashmiris. Now please have a listen to some audio statements that were sent in to us. Thank you to those that were able to do so.
Hey, I'm a student from Kashmir. Well, talking about how occupation has affected the mental health of every Kashmiri. Let me take a simple example. I know every Kashmiri has witnessed this. See, when we go out of our homes, like we reach the main roads, we see these junctions, these security forces bunkers all over. Like you have to stop there. They stop you deliberately. They stop you. If you are a young man riding a bike or a car, they stop you deliberately, and you have to go through this frisking, and you face humiliation. Like every day when you go out there riding a bike in a good mood, and you are being stopped and frisked regularly, so you feel humiliated, and this takes a toll on your mental health. Like they claim that this is for the security of the people of Kashmir, and that's completely wrong. This affects the mental health in really it leaves a bad impact on you. So these are the kind of things that happen here usually, and these are the basic things apart from the month-long curfews that are being imposed here. This is just a basic, and now I'll say that I'll overcome this obstacle by just entertaining myself, just keeping me busy. And how I'll keep myself busy? How do you expect me to keep myself busy from all this trauma that is being caused due to these security forces? I'll simply go to the internet. Oh, sorry, internet is not available here. And still you expect us to be normal. See, it really feels bad. Like when I travel outside Kashmir, I see people there, I see students. For them, normal is normal. And for us, normal is not normal at all. We are being imposed with this idea of being normal when actually we are not normal, and we are facing these kind of things, these kind of trauma. This is unexplainable. Obviously it gets pretty frustrated. Like the world might have witnessed only one lockdown, but Kashmir here is going through the second lockdown in past 2 years, and that's completely frustrating. Now you can imagine the level of frustration in the students, because you see the teenage phase of a student is a teenage age of a person is a very active phase, and being locked up where your productivity is zero, your creativity is zero, you can imagine yourself what kind of impact it leaves on your mental health. So obviously everybody will prefer to go outside for their studies, and everyone will think of their education, because see, education is the basic thing. If you have to destroy a community, just stop their education, just bar their education. And that is what these kind of things are doing to us Kashmiris. And on the other side, if you want to go outside abroad to study, everyone cannot afford that. What about the underprivileged class of Kashmir? What about their children? What about those students who belong to the underprivileged class who cannot afford to go outside and study? See, this will leave a huge toll on their mental health. Like, why I was not able to study at that time? Because of this lockdown, because of this occupation, I was not able to study. I was not able to complete my education. I couldn't afford that. So these are the kind of things. This will leave a huge toll on their mental health, and this is what occupation is doing to us and to our mental health.
My total outlook at life, man and universe has got affected, and I'm sure with most of the people living under brutal occupation, which is unethical, illegal, thuggish of India, obviously, through its mercenaries, which they call Indian Army, who are basically a group of rapists and murderers. I believe if it were not for Islam and its teachings, perhaps the mental trauma and the darkness of Indian illegal occupation of our lands, our resources, our institutions, our lives could have had much greater impact. But thanks to our religion of justice that we follow, which gives us meaning and strength to stand in the face of Indian occupation, their propagandists, their gangsters, and it never allows us to lose hope in justice and retribution for the countless crimes, barbaric crimes of Indian mercenaries upon the people of Kashmir.
In our days, early 90s, that is, we used to face a lot of curfews by Indian establishment, and there were no modes of distance learning as we have today through internet. How we dealt with it was by studying under some learned family member or a distant family member, or through books by ourselves, and whatever we could get our hands on. Personally, I didn't go outside. I finished my school and college through all those obstacles of curfews. But yeah, certainly it was tough. It wasn't smooth. And I do know some of my friends who went out of Kashmir for their studies. Well, the trauma that I experienced as a child was when our house was burned down to ashes by Indian armed Hindu terrorists. That has remained with me for a long time. I can never forget the look on my father's face, who was helplessly watching his house burned to ashes right in front of him. The house that he built by his hard-earned money, all the earnings, all the savings, all the memories, all the achievements got destroyed and annihilated by that cruel act of terrorism by Indian armed mercenaries. I remember my father wearing the same pair of shirts for several years after that, because we had lost everything. Although that memory has faded away a little, primarily due to the existential satisfaction that my religion provided. But it did affect our psychology.
Firstly, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to everyone who is listening to this. This is from Pulwama, Kashmir, and we have some serious questions that have been raised by one of my friends, so we have to answer all these things. First question is, how has the occupation impacted your mental health? So my answer will be like this. We have seen this occupation from last 70 years now, and as everyone knows, as a Kashmiri, as India has illegally occupied Kashmir, and almost 1.2 million troops are here that has been deployed by Indian government. And we have seen encounters, we have seen lockdowns, we have seen internet shutdowns for years, abuse of human rights, innocent killings. And more than this, freedom movement is being suppressed, and all these factors usually contribute. What it contributes, they have a lot of impact on our mental health. So this was actually the first question, how has the occupation impacted your mental health? So if we contribute, if we add all these factors, obviously your mental health, it will have a great impact on our mental health. And if we count the numbers in Kashmir, almost here in Kashmir, everybody is affected with this. So I will have a brief answer about this, and I will just click to my second question. The second question here is how you have overcome the obstacle. If we see the obstacles, there are numbers. There are a lot of numbers, hindrances or obstacles, we will say. If we keep these obstacles along with your life, they are going to rule you. And for Kashmir, you don't have any option. You have to overcome all these factors. Otherwise, you will get stuck. Because if you are going to see that we have a encounter right here, we have internet shutdown, then you are not going to overcome all these factors. And we firmly believe this thing, that it's actually the resistance, our resistance, that keeps us flow. And we cannot surrender like this way, that you are going to do this and that. And for a Muslim and for a Kashmir, being a Muslim, we verily say that Allah is with those who have patience. Next question is like this. What steps did you take to assure that your educational aspirations are not hindered by occupational forces? My answer will go like this. As we know that education is the basic thing. You can only win a war with your pen. And being the prime preference, I have done higher educations outside the state. Although my prime education is here in Kashmir, and for Kashmir you have to be brave enough to clear all these obstacles that comes your way, no matter what is going day to day, because every day you see killings, you see encounters, you see internet shutdown, and we see India is coming up with different laws at different times. So you cannot get stuck. You don't have to get stuck. One thing. And for this, in order to make international communities realize what's happening in Kashmir, you have to be a literate one. You have to be educational personality who can make an impact. Question number 4 is like this. Have you experienced PTSD or known anyone that has? So, Alhamdulillah, for now and from to my previous experiences, I have not experienced this, but I have seen people who suffer with this problem, because in a war zone or in an occupational zone, you are used to it. You will see different stories with this. Recently, I have seen in a Kashmir, a man was tired and on the bonnet of a jeep, and he was being carried out to the unconscious side. What allegations were made against him that he was a stone pelter, and after confirming this news that was not true, and that person when he was released, he experienced all these things because the scene was coming into his mind that what had happened to me, how I was treated. So all these things are used to it. We are used to it actually in a warlike zone. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to have a brief interaction about Kashmir and the things going on. I will be an active member for this. I will happily cooperate with you because we feel honored that somebody is working for a Kashmir cause. Inshallah, we will win this.
Fuad, would you like to share your own answers
Well,
to
I
some
like
of
to
these
put it
questions?
briefly like this. For me, it's almost like the same. I'm living out of Kashmir only to escape that feeling and fear of suffocation and being crippled to do nothing. It's always a matter of your personal security, your family, your property, and your belongings. You're often harassed by armed forces on the streets out there, and this halts your growth in every form of your life. You cannot concentrate on your studies, nor business, nor job, nor nothing. You cannot do anything. All you're mostly worried about is the very next moment to the moment you are living in.
You know, it's so sad for me to hear that. And I think the biggest things that can help with one's mental health when you're going through something like this is first and foremost ibadah and staying away from things that you know will have a detrimental impact on you. Turning towards family and friends, reading and writing, and just persevering during these uncertain times as Kashmir is dealing with both occupation and a pandemic. So try to find sukoon in things that will be helpful to your well-being.
To now discuss Dr. Manan Wani, as October 10 marks the day that Dr. Manan Wani was killed by the Indian state. He was a scholar and had initially believed in fighting with a pen, but then eventually he was compelled to pick up arms. He has been a prominent figure in the Kashmiri freedom movement. He is hailed as a hero for Kashmiris and is regarded as a martyr. India paints educated men such as Dr. Manan Wani, who were forced to take up arms to defend themselves, their families, and their people as terrorists. For me and for our listeners today, I would like to say Manan Wani was not a common Kashmiri. Those who are martyrs are very special, and Manan had an edge, being a solid fighter with both pen and gun. I'm going to read some lines from his article that he wrote addressing the people of Kashmir and challenging the Indian occupation. Words matter, that's what he has titled it. Be peaceful, be courteous, obey the law, respect everyone. But if someone puts his hand on you, send him to the cemetery. This is the quote from Malcolm X, the American leader. And he is starting with quoting him. Occupation is not easy to understand. It's a very complex and multifaceted phenomenon. The decades-long bloody conflict has turned Kashmir into one of the most politically mature nations of the world. With the time, we all have somewhat understood the complex functioning structure and machinery of occupation. India as a colonial state is slowly but steadily failing in justifying its colonial rule to the people of Kashmir. But occupation is like cancer. Thus, we as a nation and community have to evolve and update ourselves of the new military, mental and diplomatic tactics of India as a colonial state. You might be wondering why I, one who chose the gun or pen, decided to write. There are few things that I believe made it hard for me to be silent. Collaborators nowadays are obfuscating facts to justify occupation and oppression while playing with emotions of gullible masses. Human rights defenders are turning into business monsters and are making conflict a business by featuring the pain of oppressed. Activism is guided and directed from Delhi studios. From print media to electronic media, everyone from oppressor to oppressed has chosen to castigate us, our ways and methodology, our ideology and thought process by simply demonizing us. When people who are forced to give up gun to propagate peaceful ways of resistance try to justify our methods of resistance by their own understanding and logic, but actually disown us and our ideology. And lastly, when a former cop turned human rights defender who worthlessly tried to crush genuine aspirations of people during his tenure tries to preach humanity and moderatism through half-hearted and illogical arguments. I'm reading some more lines from his article. We're soldiers. We don't fight to die, but to win. We don't feel dignity in death. but we do feel dignity in fighting in an occupation. It's a military might, its oppression, its tyranny, its collaborators, and most of all, its ego. And if and when we will die while fighting all this, we do feel dignity in that death. By we, I mean Kashmiri, and by Kashmiri, I mean every citizen of Jammu and Kashmir who is fighting the occupation in one or another way, not just the gun, not just the men with gun. Those calling us terrorists should either change their textbooks or their rhetoric. The people of India are being taught that Kashmiri militants are brainwashed young boys who join militancy for 72 virgins, and they believe dying like this is a shortcut for Jannah. There is no denying that Islam is our motivation and way of life, and Islam indeed promises Jannah, fighting against every kind of oppression in whatever means one can.
So, any mention of these individuals in posts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and so on often results in immediate warnings or bans. Even the fact that we're talking about this right now, we don't know what the consequences will be of that. But Kashmir Civitas has occasionally tried to mention these martyrs and why they were forced to take up arms. But this led to our Facebook page being taken down, which we're working on putting back up again. Hindatva extremists call Kashmiris terrorists, when legally Kashmiris have the right to take up arms due to them being a disputed territory. According to the United Nations Resolution 37/43 of December 1982, it states the following: reaffirms the legitimacy of the struggle of peoples for independence, territorial integrity, national unity, and liberation from colonial and foreign domination and foreign occupation by all available means, including armed struggle. So yes, based on this, we think it's ridiculous that social media platforms don't want to hear about Kashmiris who have defended themselves illegally from the Indian state. This is a clear legal right for any occupied people to protect themselves from their aggressor.
میانیو عزیز ہموطنو تو بزرگو السلام علیکم پیش چھ پٲز کتھ ازکِس شمارس منٛز چھِ اسہِ نوِ أکِس پیش رفت ہٕنٛز زانکٲری تۄہہِ دِنۍ یژھان ییٚمہِ سۭتۍ بھارتی ہندوتو ظٲلمن ہٕنٛز گھبراہٹ تہٕ لاچٲری ہٕنٛز دٔلیٖل چھِ برونٛہہ کُن یِوان ہندوستانن چھِ ٲخٕر لاچار گٔژھِتھ پٲکستان کٮ۪ن گۄڈن پٮ۪ٹھ وٲتِتھ کتھ باتھ ہٕنٛز پیشکش کٔرمٕژ امہِ پیشکش ہُنٛد مقصد چھُ کٔشیٖرِ ہٕنٛدِس مسلس ژھٮ۪وِر دیُن تِکیازِ مسلے کشمیٖر چھُ وۄنۍ تمام عالمس منٛز مشہوٗر گوٚمُت کتھ باتھِ ہٕنٛدِ آنکارٕ سۭتۍ چھِ ییٚمہِ چیٖزٕچ ژینوٕنۍ مِلان زِ بھارتی سامراجس چھُ کٔشیٖرِ انٛدر سپدن والٮ۪ن موٗجوٗدٕ حالاتو سۭتۍ سٮ۪ٹھاہ ژٮ۪ل ووتمُت وۄنۍ چھُ ہندوستان کٔشیٖرِ ہٕنٛدِس مسلس نہ رازٕ پوشان تہٕ نہ ہٲنزٕ سٲری عالمی اجتماع نہ کہ صرف اقوام متحدہ بلکہ انسٲنی حقوٗقن ہٕنٛزٕ تنظیٖمہٕ ہیوٗمن رائٹس واچ تہٕ ایمنیسٹی انٹرنیشنل ہِشو تنظیٖمن ہٕنٛزِ شرکت سۭتۍ چھُ مسلے کشمیٖر سرگرم بھارتی سامراج یُس تہِ جبری قدم چھُ تُلان سُہ چھُ تِمن پانس زنگن یِوان ولنہٕ وُنکیٚس چھُ تِمن چیٖنس سۭتۍ تہِ اختلاف بنگلہ دیشس سۭتۍ تہِ اختلاف سری لنکا سۭتۍ تہِ اختلاف حتیٰ کہ نیپال یُس کہ پانہٕ اکھ ہندو مُلک چھُ تِمن سۭتۍ تہِ صحیح اختلاف تہٕ پٲکستان چھُ ٲستھٕے نہ صرف یہِ بلکہ کٲشرٮ۪ن خاموش کرنُک یُس تہِ منصوٗبہٕ بندی بھارت سامراج چھُ کران تمہِ کہِ نتیٖجہٕ چھِ تِم پانہٕ بین الاقوٲمی سطحس پٮ۪ٹھ دم پھٔٹۍ گٔمٕتۍ اس لیے چھُ یہِ مُنٲسِب ساتھ پننہِ کوٗششہِ دۄگنہٕ کرنٕچ اسہِ چھُ وُنکیٚس سٮ۪ٹھاہ محنت کرٕنۍ تاکہ یُس دباو ہندوستانس سانہِ کٲوشو سۭتۍ آمُت چھُ خصوٗصاً سوشل میڈیا یا علمی ادارن ہٕنٛدِ ذٔریعہٕ یہِ دباو چھُ جٲری تھاوُن اسہِ پزن دُنہِکۍ لُکھ تہٕ مُلک آگاہ کرٕنۍ تہٕ نہ صرف ہندوستٲنۍ مال ہٮ۪نہٕ نِش گُریز کرُن بلکہ ہندوستان ہر سطحس پٮ۪ٹھ خٲرج کرُن یِم کوٗششہِ چھِ اسہِ ہر حالس منٛز جٲری تھاونہِ تہٕ امہِ ساری برونٛہہ چھُ اسہِ اللہ سبحانہ وتعالیٰ سٕنٛز رضا بکار یہِ توکُل تھاوو تہٕ انشاء اللہ أسۍ گژھو پننِس مقصدس منٛز کامیاب
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Dr. Sayyid Mujahid Gilani. By profession, I am a critical care medical specialist and I am a die-hard Kashmiri activist, forming part of the divided families due to Kashmir conflict. I believe Kashmir is not just any issue. It's not a dispute or a conflict. What we should focus these days, what we should focus now, is the human stories of Kashmir, is the pain and suffering that's going on inside Kashmir. I understand the ideological basis of the Kashmir conflict. I understand the principled stand of the Kashmiri people for everyone who belongs to the ground. But all the same, I believe that the world needs to listen to our stories, that the world needs to know that this is beyond borders, that the world needs to understand that the people of Kashmir are suffering because of the Indian brutalities, of the Indian obstinacy. The second more important thing that I believe that every Kashmiri across the whole world, and whether that Kashmiri is currently on the ground or outside it, ये कच्छ सठा ज़्यादा ज़रूरी कि इस समझो ये चीज़ कि सारी कशिर च तुम च अकई यात मज़ खास तौर पे तुम कशिर अगर तुम च वन ग्राउंडस पे रोज़ान के तुम च वन कशिर रोज़ान के मगर तुम च नबर आमत तुम च पाकिस्तानस मज़ या बाकी दुनियास मज़ फैलिमत मगर तुम च हिस्स अख ग्राउंडक बच बल्कि हिस्स ना हिस्स गो अख अलग चीज़ तुम च एसेट सु ग्राउंडक वारिया कशिर बच्च में वुचमित कशिर जवान में वुचमित यूरोपस मज़ यम पनिन छना हिंदुस्तान मकबूजा कशिरक तम च आमत यूरोपस मज़ तम च परान वन ततनस मास्टर्स PhD करान यम गई तम नफर यम च सन एसेट यात मज़ अख च कि डेफिनेटली यम च परान करन के इंशाल्लाह डिग्री शिग्री तो यम हेकन बाकी इस कशिर मज़ नौजवान जे सन अगर तम च आसान नबर कुन नेरुन नबर पारुन तमन हेकन यम गाइड करित ज़्यादा असल पेट बे ये कि यम पाकिस्तानस मज़ त रोजान तम हेकन असल पेट कशिर हिंद आवाज़ बनित कैस कि तमन छ ग्राउंड से ताल्लुक आसान बह कर अगर पन कथ मे पाई मतलब मे गई वन वरी खंड तथ खोत ज़्यादा मगर मे रिश्तेदार रोजान मे पन लुख मे पन मास मे वनकस जेलस मज़ मे मासू जेलस मज़ मे बोय गोमुत शहीद यथ मज़ मे ताल्लुक यथ सत सह ताल्लुक मे शायद आज़ाद कशुर आस तमिस आस न कह मगर आज़ाद कशुर कोशुर मानव सह कोशुर बहर सूरत अगर सह गलत वथ पे या तमिस कह ब्या कह सोच डेवलप गम सोन कम कि वनो तमिस क्या ग्राउंडस मज ऑब्जेक्टिव ग्राउंडस मज आइडियोलॉजी सह क्या इसलिए हमेशा पे मे पानस बासान कि योतान गसो न कशर इकवटे यथ मज कह योतान वनो न कि सारी कशर सोन ऑब्जेक्टिव अकुई कुन्नी यथ मज तोतान हेको न कामयाब गसित यथ मज कह ग्राउंडस पे कशर रोजान सह गस हकारत सत वुचन बाकिन कशर कह नबर गमित नबर आमित यह किस्मत वनकस चूरिम जनरेशन कम अज कम यथ मज मगर यह इम्पार्टेंट यह बासान यह अहम यथ मज कि गसो अख कनेक्ट थावन ग्राउंड सह कनेक्ट इम्पार्टेंट अगर कनेक्ट कह सह गई अलग कथ पे मतलब आइडेंटिटी मकल पे नफरस पाई नबर कि कशर क्या गसान इसलिए सह हेक कथ कर कशर मुतलिक शायद मगर यमिस कनेक्ट ग्राउंड समिस पाई कि ग्राउंडस मज क्या गसान लुख यतनस ग्राउंडस मज तम क्या फीलिंग्स आसान तम क्या वनकस सोचान इसलिए मे बासान कि कोशर अगर जर्मनीस मज अफ्रीकस मज तमिस हक वातान सह कर कशर मुतलिक कथ मगर सह गई सिंसियरिटी सह गई ऑनेस्टी सह सह ब्या यथ मज मामलो गस वुचन मगर ग्राउंडस मज कोशर तमिस खतर अख पैगाम कि सारी कशर अकई यथ मज तो बहुत वन आजकल क्या वनो इन द फ्री एटमॉस्फेयर and an environment that allows me to speak up for anything और यहाँ पे फिर बात करने के लिए میں سمجھتا ہوں کہ جہاں ایک میں نے اپنی فیملی کا بھی ایک سمجھتا ہوں اپنا بھی ہے، تو کشمیر کے لیے بولنا بھی ہے، بتانا بھی ہے، سمجھانا بھی ہے. تو الحمدللہ کافی کچھ کیا. جو یوتھ ہے خاص طور پہ یونیورسٹی کی یوتھ ہے، اور اس میں صرف یہ بات نہیں کہ صرف بولا ہے، بولنے کے ساتھ سمجھایا ہے کہ کشمیر آخر ہے کیا. کشمیر کو پڑھا ہے، پڑھنے کے بعد بتایا کہ کشمیر کی ایڈوکیسی اگر آپ نے کرنی ہے، آپ اپنے آپ کو وکیل سمجھتے ہو کشمیر کا، تو آپ نے باہر جانا ہے. تو باہر آپ نے کشمیر کے لیے کیا بولنا ہے، آپ کا جو کاؤنٹر پروپیگنڈا ہے اس کو آپ نے کیسے کاؤنٹر کرنا ہے. یوتھ میں پھر اس کے بعد کوئزز کرنا، اس میں ایسے رائٹنگ کے ذریعے کرنا، اس میں ٹویٹر اسٹارم کرنا وہاں پہ، یا ایسی پوسٹس بنوانا، ایسی کوئی ایکٹیویٹیز کرانا، سیمینار کانفرنس کرنا، اور یوتھ کو ایجوکیٹ کرنا پراپرلی لیکچر کے ذریعے سے بھی، یا کوئی چھوٹے چھوٹے گیدرنگس میں، اور گیدرنگس میں ان سے کوشچن آنسر سیشنز کر کے، اس طرح سے یوتھ کو خاص طور پہ، کیونکہ یوتھ ہی ہے ایسی جو ہماری کشمیر کی ہے یا پاکستان کی ہے، جس نے آگے جا کے اس نے بولنا ہے کشمیر پہ، اس نے کشمیر کو ایڈوکیٹ کرنا ہے دنیا بھر میں. تو جو دماغ میں ایک دفعہ بیٹھے گا کہ کشمیر کیا ہے اور کشمیر کے لیے کیا بولنا ہے، تب کہیں آگے وہ کشمیر کے لیے کچھ بول سکتا ہے. تو اب وہ تمام باتیں کہ اس میں آپ لگا دیتے ہو، پھر جیو پولیٹیکل ہے، جغرافیکل امپورٹنس ہے، اسٹریٹجک امپورٹنس ہے، یہ سارے ورڈنگس وغیرہ چیزیں لگا کے ملا کے، پھر اس کے بعد تمام جو یہاں پہ بالخصوص ایک فری ورلڈ کے اندر لوگ موجود ہیں، ان کو آپ بول سکتے ہو کہ کشمیر کیا ہے اور کیا نہیں ہے. تو الحمدللہ مطلب باسان کہ الحمدللہ لکھن پانس باسان کہ ہاں کشمیر کیا ہے، لوگ کیوں وہاں پہ ابھی بھی شہید ہوتے ہیں، کھڑے ہوتے ہیں، وہ ہندوستان کے ساتھ کیوں نہیں ملتے ہیں. تو there has been a lot of, I believe, a drift from a routine rhetoric to something more proactive, to something that can actually create an impact, if not really on the ground, but at least on the other diplomatic and international levels. Then I believe that it is not just a military occupation, but an occupation and oppression we are facing in every sector: education, health, and other fields, cultural. ہر سیکشن میں ہمارا ایک آکیوپیشن ہے. تو اس کو بھی ہائی لائٹ کر کے، اس کی کچھ چھوٹی ڈاکیومنٹریز بنا کے، اس کے ہیلتھ کے حوالے سے خاص طور پہ ڈاکٹر ہوں تو چلو وہاں اس طرح گراؤنڈ پہ بھی رابطہ ہے، تو ان چیزوں کو ہائی لائٹ کرنا کہ یار ہیلتھ کو لے کے آپ دنیا کو دکھاؤ، بولو کہ آپ تو بڑا صحت کرتے ہو، کووڈ کرتے ہو، تو دیکھو کشمیر میں کیا ہو رہا ہے. These are the points and things. I always believe that whenever you are fighting for something that is justified, that is legitimate, I believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always gives you some victory in your cause. And that victory for us is not just going to be in this world. What we are aiming for mainly is our akhirah. And that is what our iman and the level of our iman should be. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant our Kashmir freedom, independence from Indian occupation very soon. And may He end this chapter of divided families and may we unite all of us, inshallah. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
وۄنۍ کرو أسۍ تۄہہِ برونٛہہ کَنہِ خالد بشیر صٲبٕنۍ کشمیر ایکسپوزنگ the myth behind the narrative کِتابہِ ہٕنٛدۍ خاص چیٖدٕ پویِنٹ پیش. کِتابہِ ہُنٛد مرکزی بُنیاد چھِ أکِس فارسی شعرس پٮ۪ٹھ مُشتمل، ییٚمیُک مطلب چھُ کہِ اگر سۄ دیوار بناون وول معمار، اگر سُہ گۄڈنِچی سیٖر غلط ترٛایہِ یا ۂج ترٛایہِ، پتہٕ اگر یہِ دیوار کوتاہ تہِ تھوٚد کھسہِ، چاہے آسمانس تانۍ، یہِ دیوار روزِ پرٛٮ۪تھ ساتہٕ ہوٚل. یِتھے کٔنۍ چھِ کٔشیٖرِ ہٕنٛز تاریٖخٕچ تعمیٖر تہِ امی یِتھی حج فاؤنڈیشن پہ حج بنیاد پہ کھڑا آمٕژ کرنہٕ تہٕ اتھ بنیاد چھِ اکھ کتاب یتھ ونان چھِ یتھ ناو چھُ راج ترنگنی تتھ اگر ٹرانسلیشن کرو سُہ چھُ باسان the river of kings مگر اتھ چھُ ناو آمُت بدلٲیِتھ یہِ وننہٕ کہِ یہِ ہسا چھِ ہسٹری بادشاہن ہٕنٛز یہِ آو یہِ نیریٹو یا امیُک یہِ غلط مانے جنریشن پہ جنریشن تانۍ آو پکناونہٕ چاہے یہ بائی ڈیزائن آو کرنہٕ یا لاپرواہی سان یا روایتن برونٛہہ کُن پکنٲیِتھ آو اتھ کتابہِ ہُنٛد غلط ناو دِنہٕ اتھ آو وننہٕ ہسٹری آف کنگس تہٕ بِلاخر یہِ اپُز وۄنۍ آو الٹِمیٹلی ٲخر کار بنے امیُک بنیاد کٔشیٖرِ ہٕنٛز تٲریٖخٕچ بنیاد 1990 منٛز ییٚلہِ کٔشیٖرِ منٛز مُسلح شوٗرِ شروٗع گٔے تہٕ امہِ پتہٕ کٲشِر پنڈت گٔے بڑٕ پیمانس پٮ۪ٹھ نقل مکانی کرنہٕ تمہِ پتہٕ آو امہِ کمیونٹی ہُنٛد یہِ بیان بٲزی یہِ داستان یۄس جنم ٲس آمٕژ ہٮ۪نہٕ یہِ آیہِ بدلاونہٕ ہندوستانی نقطۂ نظرس منٛز وقتس سۭتۍ سۭتۍ یہِ کتاب تہٕ امِکۍ غٲر ضروٗری نتائج بنے ٲخر کار کٔشیٖرِ ہٕنٛز تٲریٖخ خیال کٔرِو کہِ کلہنہن چھِ کٔشیٖرِ ہٕنٛز 3000 ؤرین ہٕنٛز ہسٹری صرف 7870 منٛز منحصر کٔرمٕژ صرف پننِس شاعرانہٕ تخلیاتس پٮ۪ٹھ تہٕ بیٚیہِ تِمن لۄکٹٮ۪ن مۄکٹٮ۪ن کینٛہن ذرایعن پٮ۪ٹھ تہٕ اتھ پٮ۪ٹھ چھِ أمۍ دِژمٕژ امہِ راج ترنگنی کتابہِ ہٕنٛز بنیاد کلہنا چھُ ونان کہِ مےٚ ہسا لیٚچھِ راج ترنگنی أکِس ؤرِیس منٛز امہِ سۭتۍ ہٮ۪کو أسۍ یِہے اخذ کٔرِتھ کہِ کلہنا اوس اکھ ذہین ادیب نہ کہِ اکھ مورخ کشمیر ایکسپوزنگ the myth behind the narrative چھُ اتھ تٲریٖخی حقائقن ذٔریعہٕ اتھ بیانیہس چیلنج کر کتاب چھِ تٲریٖخس ماضیس اتھ حالس سۭتۍ لنک کران تہٕ امہِ ذٔریعہٕ چھِ پتہٕ یِمن حالاتن سمجھنس منٛز بہتریٖن مدد کران جونا راجا تہٕ سریوارا یِم کلہناہس پتہٕ آیہِ تِمو چھُنہٕ پننہِ کامہِ منٛز اسلامُک فروغ تہٕ برہمنی طاقتن ہُنٛد ختم گژھنُک کُنہِ قٕسمُک ذِکر کوٚرمُت امہِ پتٕکۍ مورخیٖن یِمن منٛز اکھ بوٚڑ تعداد مُسلمانن ہُنٛد اوس تِمو پکنٲو یہِ داستان یہِ تِمن بوزنہٕ ٲس آونٲمٕژ تہٕ اتھ سۭتۍ نقل کران ترووُکھ پنُن تہِ کینٛہہ بِگاڑ اتھ منٛز یِژھٕ تاریٖخ لیکھنُک نتیٖجہٕ درٛاو یہِ کہِ اکھ خاص داستان گٔے برونٛہہ کُن پکان ییٚمہِ ذٔریعہٕ کٲشرٮ۪ن ہٕنٛدِس ماضیَس آو بالکل اکہِ غلط طریٖقہٕ سان وٕچھنہٕ تواریٖخی مطالعہٕ تہٕ یِمن حقائقن ہٕنٛز روشنی منٛز چھِ یہِ کتھ بالکل بے بُنیاد قرار گژھان کہِ اصلی باشندٕ نسا چھِنہٕ مُسلمان تِکیازِ تِمو کوٚر ہندو مذہب پٮ۪ٹھ اسلام قبوٗل یہِ تواریٖخی حقیٖقت زاننٕچ چھِ اشد ضروٗرت تِکیازِ یہِ چھُ یِوان زبردست پٲٹھۍ ہندوستانس منٛز پروپیگنڈا کرنہٕ کہِ غٲر مُلکی مُسلمانو سا کٔڑۍ اتِکۍ اصلی پنڈت باشندٕ نٮ۪بر نیرنس پٮ۪ٹھ مجبوٗر صرف راج ترنگنی چھِ اکھ کٔشیٖرِ ہٕنٛدِ لیکھمٕتہِ تواریٖخُک اکھ بُنیاد اس لیے چھُ اتھ یِوان اکہِ قٕسمُک قونوٗنی درجہِ یا دوٚیمٮ۪ن لفظن منٛز ونو شرعی درجہِ ماننہٕ مگر کلہنن یۄس یہِ کٲم چھِ یہِ چھِ زیادٕ تر أمِس پننِس ذاتس متعلق تہٕ بیٚیہِ أمِس عدالتس تمہِ ساتہٕ حکوٗمتس منٛز کیاہ اوس أمۍ سُنٛد درجہِ تہٕ أمۍ سٕنٛدۍ پنٕنۍ عزایِم نہ کہِ یہِ کہِ یِمن ساس بٔدین ؤرین منٛز کیاہ گُزریو کٔشیٖرِ ہٕنٛز تواریٖخ منٛز یِتھ کٔنۍ صحیح تواریٖخی مطالعہ تہٕ حقیٖقتٕچ بُنیادن پٮ۪ٹھ چھُ یہِ ضروٗری سپدان کہِ نجی قیاس آرایی نسا ہیٚکہِ بُنیاد بٔنِتھ ساسہٕ بٔدین ؤرین ہٕنٛز تاریٖخ تہٕ امِچ چھِ اشد تہٕ نہایت ضروٗری سنجیدٕ پٲٹھۍ جانچ کرنٕچ ضروٗرت
السلام علیکم یہ پز کت ون بوزنائے عمر مختار خبر اقوام متحدہ انسانی حقوقن ہند کونسل ووٹنگ تحت آو پاکستان بی اکہ لٹ امیک رکن چن یہ پونچم لٹ یل پاکستان آو اقوام متحدہ باڈی دس رکن چن پاکستانس آو 169 ووٹو ست دوبارہ ممبر چن یم ووٹ ترائے 193 رکنو یم اقوام متحدہ ست منسلک ات موقع پہ کور پاکستانک وزیر اعظم جناب عمران خان صٲبن یہ وعدہ کہ پاکستان روز ہمیشہ مقبوضہ کشیر مز ظلم تو زیادتی بی انسانی خلاف ورزین ہز مذمت کران تمو وون مزید کہ تم کرن مکار ہندوستانس بے نقاب یم ننہ وان مقبوضہ کشیر اندر قتل و غارت دہرات انجام دتمت تمو وون پاکستانک دوبارہ رکن چن ست میلیو پاکستانس اخ بہترین موقع کہ تم تلن مقبوضہ کشیر ہند مسئلہ پورا عالمس برونٹ کن تمو وون کہ اقوام متحدہ کہ کشرین ہز آواز بنت ات موقع پہ وون پاکستانک خارجی وزیرن کہ مسئلہ کشمیر تو اسلاموفوبیا بی مسلمانن ہند انسانی حقوق آسن پاکستانچ اولین ترجیح اقوام متحدہ اندر پاکستانک خارجی وزیر جناب شاہ محمود قریشین وون ژندروار دہ کہ دنیا چھن ہندوستان کس گمراہ کن وضاحتس اچھ وٹت تسلیم کرنے خاطر تیار کہ تم کیا دن کشیر ہندس تحریک حق خدراتیتس جدوجہد کن تہ رنگ دہشت گردی ست تشبیہ میڈیاہس خطاب کران وون تمو کہ ہندوستانک منفی بیان آو پاکستان کی جدوجہد ست یمو کشیر ہنز اصل حقیقت پور دنیا سمجھومز تو ہاونچ پور کوشش کران رودمت تمو وون مزید کہ پاکستانک موقف اس پزس حقیقت پہ مبنی پور دنیا خصوصاً یورپین پارلیمنٹ تو عالمی میڈیا تہ ون تسلیم کران امہ وجہ ست ون عالمی ادارن بی عالمی میڈیا ہندوستان کس موقفس پہ اچھ وٹت قطن تو اعتبار کران تمو وون پاکستان دنیا برو کن امنچ اخ دعوت دن وول یوان مان نہ کہ لڑائی جھگڑن دعوت دن وول ملک تمو دژ امچ مثال افغان امن عملی ہند یس افغانستانس تو امریکہ درمیان جاری تمو وون کہ تم پتمو 20 وریو پہ کت بات لڑائن ہند حل مانان مگر آز 20 ؤہر پتہ دنیا کس طاقتور ملکس تہ طور فکر کہ کت بات پریت کن مسلک حل بہترین صورت تمو دیت ات کتھ کن اشارہ ز ہندوستانس پزِ امہ چیز نش سبق ہچن بیٚیہِ جلد از جلد مقبوضہ کشیر اندر انسانی خلاف ورزی قتل و غارت رکاوٕنۍ بیٚیہِ مقبوضہ کشیر ہند مسئلہ کٲشرین ہنزِ رضامندی تحت حل کرن وزیر اعظم سند مشیر برائے قومی سلامتی و اسٹریٹجی پالیسی پلاننگ جناب ڈاکٹر معید یوسف صٲبن کور اکس انٹرویوس مز یہ انکشاف ہندوستانن سوز پیغام یتھ مز تمو پاکستانس ست کت کرنچ کوشش کر امہ کتھ ہند خلاصہ کور تمو اکس انٹرویوس مز یس تمو ہندوستانی میڈیا ست یتھ مز ہندوستانک مشہور صحافی کرن تھاپر موجود اوس تمو وون کہ ہندوستانس ست ہیکہ نہ توتام کت بات گژھت کہ یوتام ہندوستان مقبوضہ کشیر اندر ظلم تو زیادتی بی سرکاری دہشت گردی مقبوضہ کشیر مز فوراً رکاوِ تمو وون مزید ز کشیر مسئلہ کشمیرک اہم تو تریم فریق ہنز شمولیت ہندوستانس پزِ جلد از جلد تسلیم کریں تمو وون کہ ہندوستانس ست کت بات کریں چھنہ توتام مناسب کہ یوتام نہ تم مقبوضہ کشیر مز فوجی معاصرہ یس پتمہ وریہ کہ اگست پتہ کوچ جاری ختم کرن تمو وون مزید کہ ہندوستان غیر قانونی ڈومسائل قانون واپس نیون یمیک اصلی مقصد تو مدعا آبادی تبدیل کریں یعنی مقبوضہ کشیر اندر کشرین مسلمانن ہنز اکثریت اقلیتس مز تبدیل کریں بی تمام کشر سیاسی قیدی جیلو مز رہا کریں تمو وون کہ ہندوستانک پتمہ وری اگست پہ تمام فیصلہ عالمی قانونن ہنز بی اقوام متحدہ ہندین قراردادن ہنز سراسر ننوان خلاف ورزی بودوار دہ گئی شپین ضلع مز اکس مقابلس مز مجاہد لڑان شہید مجاہد اس چاکورہ گامس مز یس شپین مارکیٹ پہ 9 کلومیٹر چہ دوری پہ واقع مکار مخبرن ہز اطلاع پہ کور بھارتی ظالم تو قابض فوجن علاقس جبری معاصرہ مجاہدو کور بہادری سان ساسہ بدین ملٹری والن ست مقابلہ تو کر شام شہادت نوش علاقو لکو کور معاصرہ پھٹراونچ کوشش مگر بھارتی ظالم فوجن کر پیلٹ تو آنسو گیس استعمال اللہ تعالیٰ کرن یمن جنت الفردوس عطا اکس عالمی رپورٹس مز بھارتس فٹکار لگاوان ون آمت زِ بھارت عالمی قانون خلاف ورزی کرت کشمیرس مز انسانی حقوقن ہندین اہلکارن بند تھوت رپورٹس مز یہ ون آمت زِ بھارت غیر قانونی ہتھ کنڈ اپنوت کشیر ہند مادیت لوٹان رپورٹس مز NCRCAA یُک تہِ ذکر کرنہٕ آمت کۄکر ناگ پیٖر تکیہ علاقس مز بھارتی فوجس پٮ۪ٹھ لُکو الزام لگومُت زِ تِمو دیُت یِہنٛدِس زِراتس نار آو گام والیو دٔسۍ جلدی ژھٮ۪تہٕ کرنہٕ مگر زِراتس ووت سٮ۪ٹھاہ نۄقصان ذالی زیان یِم چیٖنٕکۍ خارجی منسٹری ہٕنٛدۍ ترجمان چھِ ووٚنمُت کہِ چین چھُنہٕ لداخٕچ یونین ٹیریٹری تسلیم کران کینٛہہ کیازِ یہِ چھےٚ ہندوستانن عالمی غیر قونوٗنی ہٕنٛز خلاف ورزی تحت بنٲومٕژ آمٕژ تِمو ووٚن مزید کہ لداخ تہٕ اروناچل پردیش چھُنہٕ ہندوستانُک حصہٕ قطن تہِ دِیِو اجازت نوِ ہفتہٕ سمکھو ییٚتھۍ وقتس پٮ۪ٹھ السلام علیکم
میٛانہِ خۄدایا یہِ ہندوستانُک گن کڑ واپس ییٚتہِ میٛانہِ خۄدایا کٔشیٖر کرُن آزاد میٛانہِ خۄدایا یِم حالات چھِ یِم کر ٹھیٖک میٛانہِ خۄدایا ملٹری کڑُن ییٚتہِ واپس میٛانہِ خۄدایا یِم جیلن منٛز چھِ تِم تہِ کرُکھ آزاد تِم تہِ کرُکھ یلہٕ میٛانہِ خۄدایا تِم تہِ کڑُکھ پننٮ۪ن گرن ملٹری کرُکھ ییٚتہِ لار کٔشیٖر کرُن آزاد میٛانہِ خۄدایا کٔشیٖر کرُن آزاد
بہت شکریہ آج کا شو سننے کے لیے میرا پیغام میرے ہم وطنوں کے لیے یہ ہے کہ ہم نے ہمت نہیں ہارنی ہے اور جتنا ہم آپس میں اتحاد سے رہیں گے اتنا ہمارا دشمن وقت کے ساتھ کمزور ثابت ہوگا دشمن جو چاہے کرے ہم مسلمان ہیں اور ہمیں امید ہے کہ اللہ تعالیٰ ایک نہ ایک دن ضرور ہماری دعائیں قبول کرے گا اور ہم انڈیا کو اپنے ملک سے نکال کے رہیں گے اور جتنا ہم اپنے ایمان کو مضبوط رکھیں گے اتنا ہماری دعائیں ضرور عرش تک پہنچیں گی
سٹھا شکریہ کٲشرٮ۪ن سانٮ۪ن ناظریٖنن کران یِم سون شو چھِ بوزان تِمن خٲطرٕ چھُ سون پیغام کہِ اَسہِ ہٲر نہٕ زٕہٕنۍ تہِ ہمت تہٕ نہ ہارو أسۍ زانٛہہ اَسہِ چھُ پانہٕ ؤنۍ اتحاد تھاوُن تہٕ اَمہِ سۭتۍ گژھِ سون دُشمن کمزور سٲنۍ کوٗشش چھِ کہِ أسۍ چھِ مُسلمان تہٕ أسۍ کرو اللہ تعالیٰ ہس کُن رجوع تٔمِس منگو کہِ اَسہِ کر ییٚمہِ ظُلمہٕ نِش آزاد تہٕ انشاء اللہ گژھو أسۍ جلدی آزاد ہم کیا چاہتے ہیں آزادی ہے حق ہمارا آزادی ہم چھین کے لیں گے آزادی Be sure to tune in next week to PAEZ KATH.
Have a wonderful week everyone. May your families be happy, safe and healthy always. Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.